All right, folks, it is Monday, December 22nd, only a few more days till Christmas. And all along those lines, and of course, a lot of things are taking place in and around the world. So we'll be talking about those here on Pod TV and seeing what folks have to say about a number of these stories. Bondi gunman meticulously planned attack for months, police allege, and Bondi Beach shooting suspect conducted firearms training with his father, who was an Australian. Pipe bombs and firearm training what the man accused of the Bondi attack allegedly did in the weeks before. And a Russian general killed by bomb under his car, and Moscow says Ukraine may be behind it. Russian general killed by car bomb in Moscow, officials say. And definitely that is something going on as the war continues in that part of the world as well. Delivering under fire, how Nova Post became Ukraine's wartime success story. Head of GR Baslevich during full scale war, Russians attacked 400 Novopochta branches. Nova Post wartime resilience, delivering hope amidst chaos. Definitely, that's something that folks are talking about as well. Cambodia and Thailand to hold talks on resuming Trump's truce as fighting is entering another extension and all along those lines. So Thailand and Cambodia agreed to talks in bid to end the deadly conflict. So definitely Thailand and Cambodia officials to meet amid the border clashes, and ASEAN foreign ministers gather to discuss the Thai-Cambodian conflict. Events get extra security after a Taipei knife attack. So Taiwan tightens security after deadly attacks shocked the islands. Knife attacks killed three after smoke bombing Taiwan metro. Taiwan subway stabber planned his deadly spree, is what police are saying. And Japan prepares to restart the world's biggest nuclear plant 15 years after Fukushima. So 15 years after Fukushima, they're planning to restart that particular plant. Israel cabinet approves 19 new Jewish settlements in the occupied West Bank. So definitely that is something that folks are talking about as government announces 11 new West Bank settlements and recognizes 8 outposts and neighborhoods. And China slaps tariffs of up to 42.7% on EU dairy products, alleging damage to some of the things that they've got going on as well. So China hit the EU dairy industry with tariffs of up to 42.7%. And scientists say they have discovered 20 new species deep in the Pacific Ocean. And Australian state police have got some news as well. So let's see what is going on in that particular area and what's happening in that regards. So Australian state parliament reconvenes to push stricter gun laws after the Bondi mass murders or after the Bondi shootings. Guns, terror symbols, protests, and hate speech. NSW is pushing through changes after Bondi. So what are they? And after Bondi beach attack, Intifada chants face restrictions in Australia and the UK. Freed Nigerian school children are to be reunited with their families. More abducted Nigerian children released, the government says. And Nigeria, Papiri kidnapping. All pupils kidnapped from the Catholic schools are now free, officials say. 60 Minute pulls segment on Venezuelans deported by Trump administration, drawing criticism. So 60 Minutes pulls the segment on the CCOT, the Trump administration prison. So it looks like CBS is postponing the 60 Minutes story on Trump deportees at the last minute. And CBS News chief Barry Weiss is the one that pulled the story and is sparking some outcries as well. And thousands cheer as the sun rises on winter solstice at Stonehenge. So definitely New Zealand concludes FTA with India with aim to double trade, and India wins a third free trade deal this year with their NZ agreement. India and New Zealand announced trade pact making majority of goods trade duty. And Trump administration recalls nearly 30 career diplomats from around the world. Trump ousts more Biden era ambassadors. President Trump has removed nearly 30 career diplomats from ambassadorships, and he's recalling these ambassadors, 48 of them apparently, from Africa, Asia, Eastern Europe, and South America. Sudden trips and security lapses. Steve Witkoff and Marco Rubio's clash in diplomacy on Russia and Ukraine. And Ukraine war briefings. The Russian missiles strike port near Odessa, killing seven, officials say. Escalating Russian airstrikes are aiming to cut Ukraine off from the sea, Zelensky says. And Russia strikes Ukrainian port with ballistic missiles, killing 8 and wounding dozens. Pope, a more missionary curia is needed witnessing to communion in a divided world. And France, silverware worth thousands of euros stolen from the French presidential palace. So the Elysee Palace silver and tableware stolen by Stewart, prosecutors say. So Elysee Palace staff member accused of stealing tableware worth up to £40,000. So that's something going on in terms of robberies and all along those lines. Mercosur wants on the fence EU to know it has other options. Europe stumbles in its attempt to sidestep Trump's world order. Europeans won't be eating Brazilian beef this Christmas, but farmers are still fuming. And farmers are blocking roads in Brussels to protest South Africa free trade deal. Multiple gunmen opened fire at a South African pub, killing 9 and wounding 10. So, Berkestell shooting. Gunmen killed 9 in a South Africa tavern attack. And a manhunt is underway in South Africa after a group of assailants fatally shot 9 at the tavern. And a ruinous melt for reindeer. So, Santa's reindeer are under threat. Are Russia's wolves to blame? Catch up with the reindeer in Lapland, reindeer on thin ice. Oh, how winter rain is changing the Arctic. And France to build a new aircraft carrier, Macron is saying. So, France to build a new nuclear carrier replacing the flagship Charles de Gaulle. France formally greenlights PA-NG aircraft carrier production, and Macron announces a decision to build new aircrafts on his visit to the UAE. And a neo-Nazi terrorist group steps up U.S. operations as FBI pulls back. Israel soldiers shoot and killed a West Bank teen they say hurled a rock. Israel killed 2 Palestinians, including a 16-year-old in the West Bank, and the Palestinian shot dead at close range by IDF in West Bank. IDF says he threw a brick. So definitely that's something going on in the world as well. And Rand Paul says seizure of oil tankers in Caribbean, a prelude to war. Prelude to war. Kentucky Senator Rand Paul ribs Trump's military moves in Venezuela and Syria. Rand Paul on Venezuela and all along those lines. So he said, Syria, I'd like to go back to the first Trump administration when he didn't want to start wars. Rand Paul slams Trump administration's seizure of tankers off Venezuela, a provocation and a prelude to war. North Korea's KCNA, Japan's ambition for nuclear weapons should be curbed. China issues nuclear warning to Japan, and senior LDP officials hint at need for discussion of non-nuclear principles. North Korea warns Japan's nuclear ambitions must be prevented at any cost. And Witkoff's Miami Golf Club becomes the center of global diplomacy. And Donald Trump's peace plan is faltering in the chaos of Gaza. Could an already irked Trump force Netanyahu to move on to the second phase of his Gaza plan? And definitely that's something that folks are talking about as well. Passenger bus crash in Indonesia kills at least 15 people, officials say. At least 16 people dead, and multiple others are critically injured after bus smashes into guardrail and flips over. So definitely something people are talking about as well. And there is the Burlingame toy drive going on also. At least 16 killed after passenger bus loses control and crashes in Indonesia, Java Island. And how a 5 yearly Communist Party Congress will pick Vietnam's next leader. Vietnam replaces trade minister as leadership review begins. And Vietnam's political roadmap stepping towards 2030. 13th Party Central Committee convenes their 15th meeting. Russian forces take Ukrainian villagers across border, and media says as well. So definitely that's going on in the world. And all along those lines, even Rache Shadideh believes Israel and Palestinians can still find peace, and Israel truce violation, making Gaza peace efforts incredibly difficult, is what some folks are saying, as Gaza mediators urge sides to keep truce after meeting sees little headway on the Trump plan. Turkey expects second phase of Gaza's ceasefire deal to start in early 2026. And Sweden releases boarded Russian freighter after customs inspection. Swedish authorities boarded the sanctioned Russian trip in national waters. And definitely, Kremlin says Demirtov will report to Putin on U.S. proposals for Ukrainian settlement. So there's a lot going on in the whole situation with the whole notion of what's going on in Ukraine and Russia. AG slams government's political October 7th inquiry, tailor-made for coalition needs. Lawmakers advance bill for politically appointed October 7th probe in place of state inquiry. So that's something that folks are talking about as well. And leading GOP senator says Hamas must be given a deadline to disarm or face renewed war. Lindsey Graham sounds alarm. Hamas is not disarming. Netanyahu and Senator Graham warn Hamas and Hezbollah are rearming, and that's definitely something that people are talking about as well. Um, Former spy Jonathan Pollard, Israel sent a man to convince me to kill myself, is what some folks is what he's reported about, and everything like that. And Syrians emptied Assad's prisons; they're filling up again, and abuse is rife. Unlawful detention in transitional Syria, a system in disarray. Free after 21 years in Assad prison, a Syrian adjusts to being home. So definitely that's something going on in some of the news from around the world and all along those lines. Let's see what we got in terms of news from other parts, like in the United States. Epstein's files, DOJ explores image showing Trump after backlash. U.S. lawmakers are threatening Pam Bondi with contempt action over unreleased Epstein material. Representatives Ro Khanna and Thomas Massey say they're considering inherited contempt charges against Pam Bondi. And Vance refuses to set red line over bigotry at Turning Point USA's convention. At Turning Point Fest, Vance refuses to take sides and fight over bigotry. J.D. Vance is walking a tightrope on raging Israel debate within MAGA, and Vice President J.D. Vance rallies conservatives and honored Charlie Kirk at the Turning Point USA convention. And U.S. reportedly pursuing a third oil tanker linked to Venezuela. So it looks like there's another oil tanker being intercepted as well. And Democrats renew government shutdown threat as tensions flare with Trump. We wasted a lot of time. The next shutdown deadline will be here sooner than you think. And January spending sprint takes shape. And Trump naming special envoy to Greenland angers Denmark, prompting it to call in the U.S. Denmark deeply upset by Trump's appointment of Greenland envoy who wants Allen to be part of the U.S. Trump announced he's appointing Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry to serve as U.S. special envoy to Greenland. And definitely that's something that folks are talking about as well. At least one killed as heavy rain brings floods to Northern California. And definitely that's something going on as well. And boys at her school shared AI generated nude images of her. After a fight, she was the one expelled. So let's get to some of the other news, and then we'll bring in Sasha Star and see what he's got going on in his part of the world in Canada and all along those lines. So how are you doing, Sasha? It looks like there's all kinds of talk going on, even, and I know you'll be talking about it tomorrow with Ukraine and the Europeans. They're saying they're having productive talks on ending the war, according to a U.S. envoy. And of course, we now have a suspected Brown and MIT professor shooter who apparently showed signs of anger, and even before that incident, because the friends of the Brown University shooter detailed angry behavior. He hated Brown and he hated Providence and everything like that. And they're saying two young physicists would seem destined for greatness. 2 years later, one shot the other dead. So definitely that's something going on. And apparently Donald Trump had some scary, weird address to the nation. So we were talking about that on Friday and everything like that. But some people are trying to read that and see what's going on there. But what's your take on what's going on in Ukraine and Russia?
Well, in Ukraine, what's happening is that Ukrainians are doing absolutely amazing things by attacking Russian uh, um, sea targets, including one tanker was destroyed in Mediterranean, which is very far away from Ukraine. Yet it was absolutely disabled, and the Russian uh, jet fighters are being destroyed and in different locations. And it seems to me that Ukrainians are doing absolutely fantastic war against Russian targets. And this is very discouraging. And also, now Russian lies are being exposed. For example, one line where Putin insisted that Russians took over the city of Kupiansk. A few days later, Zelensky made a picture of himself at the entrance of Kupiansk, and you could clearly see that, but it's not enough. Apparently, what's happened in Kupiansk, Russians send a group of, I don't know how to say that, basically the well equipped bandits to the city of Kupiansk, and they got some uh, buildings. However, they were absolutely disabled, and they have absolutely no um, connection to the rest of the Russian army. They are now being encircled there and systematically destroyed by Ukrainian forces. So this is what Russian called they took over Kupiansk when they send a few, I don't know, a few hundred maybe at the best, the uh, bandits, and now they're all being destroyed by Ukrainians. So there's a lot of disinformation. Now, what's happening interesting that there are a lot of so-called peace negotiations happening
Mhm.
in Florida, and I don't know how you can describe it. That a group of American people like Kushner and Vitkov, they're talking to Ukrainian groups, then they're going to Russian groups, then going to talk to Ukrainian group, and so on. And it's complete secrecy of who is talking to whom, about what they're talking. Nobody knows anything about it. It's a colossal waste of time, resources. Uh, I don't know if Ukraine even will continue these talks anymore, because now, after they got $90 billion loan from European Union, they don't need United States anymore. So I don't know why they entertain to fly to Miami and to meet to this people. I don't know at what capacity these people are. They were never elected. They were never went through approval by the Congress in any capacity. I even don't know what these people are doing there. So, so that's interesting development. We'll follow up on it.
Yep, we got other folks joining us, including Jatofi and Rick's joining us as well, and everything like that. One thing I was curious about is apparently Turning Point is had their big conference, American Fest, and they're saying that they'll put the Rift on display and all along those lines. So I was just wondering, and Rick may be walking around, so I might put him on mute for a second, but they're saying that this Rift is going on and their MAGA media mess is deepening at the Turning Point convention. So is there like a rift going on in MAGA, and is MAGA falling apart? I did see that JD Vance, I guess, was trying to say some positive words about MAGA, and there might be some people that are trying to get him further into leadership, both within MAGA and within the Trump administration. So what's your take on the friction that seems to be happening within the MAGA movement? So what's y'all's take on that?
Yeah, there's a rift. There's definitely a rift in I mean in black. I mean, they kicked out some black MAGA. They which makes sense for what it is becoming. But yeah, there's a big rift. You have the Nick Fuentes group, which is the anti-Semitic, extremely racist group. That Nick Fuentes part is actually taking over part of Matt. I mean, it's all messed up. I mean, there's no honor amongst thieves, and these are all a bunch of people who play in that extreme 4chan uh, white supremacist realm. And hey, this is what you get. You get a battle. You get this battle. And so we're gonna see what's gonna happen. Nicki Minaj got up on stage, started saying some craziness, and she set off a firestorm. It's just, yeah, this
Well,
is
speaking of firestorms, I also had a friend of mine that was saying that they were
Rick had their
surprised
hand up.
that Gloria Gaynor wanted to get honored by Trump and everything along those lines. And apparently, there's now this notion of a tour de tour de Trump, just like there. Well, not a tour de Trump, but like a Trump de Arc, kind of like the arc that exists in France. And of course, we now know that it's the Trump Kennedy Center and everything like that. So is Trump just going to put his name on everything? And we're going to have like Trump highways and
Well, hold
a
on,
bunch of
hold
other things.
on. There's a ton of stuff going on. Barry Weiss, who now runs CBS, shut down a 60 Minutes story on foreign torture prisons.
Yes.
You know, the Republicans are splitting, the MAGA splitting apart into factions. Nicki Minaj, whose husband and brother are convicted sex offenders, and so there's speculation that she's just trying to get presidential pardons. All this stuff is brewing, but we're in the early hours of Monday morning. We don't know, you know, the Epstein files have been heavily redacted illegally, but we don't know. It's too early on to see if any of this stuff will lose MAGA any followers. Record number of senators and Congress people, 11 senators, 44 representatives who decided not to run for office next year, which is a record because they think it's a shit show. But will any of this stuff really turn into freaking anything? We don't know yet.
Yep. That's true. Anything like that.
Honestly, Rick, I think this is going to start to fracture it, though. I think the Epstein file, this is why he was so when he pressed everybody saying that he was going to release it, and he brought in that whole wing of conspiracy individuals who believe that the government is doing all these conspiratorial things and hiding all this stuff from 9/11. It was an inside job to there's a Pizza Gate and all this other stuff. So Trump rode in on those individuals. Those individuals became the core of MAGA. So I think because the Epstein files, what's going on with that, and the split amongst women in the MAGA movement, I think that's really starting. That's what I think shattered or has fractured Teflon Don. And now when he his words they don't carry as much weight anymore. Like when he went out for his speech in North Carolina, people are complaining about how he talked about panties and all this other craziness. But they're complaining about it now when he did the same thing on the campaign trail and they cheered him on. So I think there's starting to be a little bit of a rift. And now we're coming into the actual midterms. And I think with him being kind of this lame duck now, and people are starting to hear what he's saying, and the Epstein files, because they really screwed this whole Epstein thing up. Like even now, the DOJ went on TV and they were caught deleting files that showed Donald Trump in there. Photos that had Donald Trump in them. They went out and deleted those because it showed Donald Trump, and they were just trying to push out photos of Clinton. So I think there's starting to be a fracture. I don't know how long it's going to stick and how long it's going to stay, but I think there are cracks forming.
Speaking of cracks forming and everything like that, and Toby, you might have some thoughts around this, and even Rick follows politics, and we did have a very moderate. Some people would say that he was kind of the progressive end of Jesse Helms, governors that passed away and everything like that. So our former Governor Jim Hunt, passed away. So I just wanted to know if you had any reflections or thought of the same, because I was hoping that Steve Rao would be here, because I know he's got some reflections, but I didn't know if either one of you that follow politics had any reflections, because there was a town in North Carolina, and still to some degree North Carolina seen as a swing state, and he was the one that kind of brought the progressive movement to this part of the South.
I didn't follow the man's career.
Gotcha. Any thoughts on it,
I have
Toby?
one more thing to add to Toby. So one way to tell if Trump's being heard is to look at opinion polls, and it takes weeks for you really to get much of a sense. And it's not a great tool. But during the government shutdown, or just after, Trump's approval hit the lowest of this term, and in some categories the lowest of both his presidential terms. Since then, they recovered by about half, back up to his normal level. And we got to see. We got to wait a couple weeks to see if the latest turmoil and the outrage over the redacted Epstein stuff affect public opinion at all. But again, we won't know until next year, really.
Into 2026, but that's just around the corner and everything
Well,
like that.
to touch on that too, I think what's going to be interesting though, Rick,
Mhm.
is what happened with the 60 Minutes. They pulled that information because it was all politics. They pulled it based on politics, not based on the factuality of it or anything. They pulled it because it was, as you pointed out, the new head of CBS. What are they going to do when the polls come out? Because remember, Trump has already sued polls that he doesn't like. So are we going to go into next year when those polls come? Are we now going to? I mean, we seem to be 2 steps away, if not 1 step away, from that full-blown dictator-style authoritarian controlling every little bit. The same thing that Putin does in Russia, same thing that they do in North Korea. That's what it seems to be where we are.
The only immediate or near-term way to stop him is to sue him and hope the courts support the suits. That takes a while. Or for enough Republicans in the House and Senate to vote against his various policies that they form a majority with the Democrats, which has already happened a little bit in limited cases. So, but besides those two things, like nationwide protests don't work. We're too big a country. Too
Yeah,
many.
it's a very big country, but everything. But just really quickly, Rick and everything, there has been some speculation that the House could, and maybe even the Senate could switch as early as the midterm election. So if that's the case, will he be impeached? And maybe that's what some people are wondering and hoping for and everything like that. Even though, as I was talking to somebody yesterday, they were saying J.D. Vance might not be that much better. And they were also telling me, because they used to have some ties to New York, that even in New York when they were growing up, they knew him as Donald the Junior Conman, because apparently his dad had some
So
very bad history as well.
impeachment has two parts. The House votes to put him on trial, and they need a simple majority. And certainly, if the House flips in 2026, they will impeach him. He's been impeached twice before. Then they put on a trial, or they're supposed to put on a trial in the Senate. And to actually kick him out of office, it takes 2/3 of the Senate to vote for that. That's never happened. They've never even come close. The closest they came was Trump's second impeachment, where Mitt Romney a Republican voted to get him out. And that, I think, is the first time they've even had one member of the president's party vote to kick him out of office. So it's likely he'll be impeached. It's very unlikely he'll be kicked out of office.
Yeah, that makes sense. Hey, Sasha, I'm gonna get to. Oh, he just left. I was going to get to him too. But Sasha, I got a question for you because I know you follow investments, and I've been having some friends that have been following it as well, and they're saying that they're seeing precious metals moving aggressively lately, and they're wondering what's driving the surge with precious metal, and they're saying that gold has even significantly outperformed expectations. So, what's going on? Is it the turmoil around the world that's causing this precious metal influx, or people to get into precious metal? And what is your take on that? Should people be getting into precious metal?
So very simple. The look at U.S. dollar. U.S. dollar is going down, 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 and that's more than enough to get precious metals much higher. They don't necessarily much higher against euro or yen or against other currencies, but they are substantially all precious metals up against dollar, and that could continue. And we don't know. Actually, the next one that will start moving higher, believe it or not, is oil. Oil is also nominated in US dollars. And if US dollar will continue its move down, then even oil will start to move higher.
But you
Yeah, the
don't have
question.
to. You can wait. You can bet on gold, which is betting on more turmoil and panic in the world, or you can do it two ways. You can bet both sides. You can bet in the short term more panic, but in the long term, people will calm down, and the price of gold will eventually drop. And there are funds there are these financial instruments where you can bet against gold, and some of them are, you can bet as strongly as you want. For every percent gold goes down, you make 2%. And gold always eventually drops. You're just betting on how long it's going to take to drop.
Yeah. Speaking of things that drop, there is, and we kind of alluded to it earlier, this notion of can we get bipartisan cooperation? And Hakeem Jeffries is claiming that Obamacare, and we talked a little bit about that on Friday, subsidy extensions will pass with bipartisan support. So he's expecting a bipartisan majority that will pass those Obamacare subsidies extensions. So do you expect this to happen, or do you think that the Republicans are too set in their ways and that a lot of folks, millions, will be impacted and won't have the health care that they need? Anybody?
4 Republicans crossed the aisle to have a vote on extending the subsidies, which raises the possibility that some of those same Republicans would join with the Democrats to vote to extend the subsidies. But that's just the House. I don't know how the Senate is going to work. But it's a lose-win for Americans. If the subsidies go away, it's a loss. But then people will rightfully blame the Republicans. If enough Republicans in the House and Senate join the Dems to extend the subsidies, then the subsidies continue, and 22 million Americans can get to continue to pay somewhat reasonable rates for health care coverage.
Well, hopefully that'll happen. Yep. Hey, Rick, do you think that
Oh, wait. Let's be honest here.
All right.
For more than a decade, they tried to take away the ACA. The reason we don't have a public option is because the Republican Party didn't want that to be in the ACA. They are now making their whole argument is that the ACA is too expensive, and this is why we're having problems. So why are you going to try and fix it when your whole policy, your whole political platform is the ACA is screwing things up? So, hey, why not start a fire, blame the other people, and then justify taking away the ACA, because that's your whole platform. That's why we're not going to get one. They've been working at this for a very long time, and now they have their opportunity. John McCain is no longer there to block the repeal of the ACA. So yes, they're going to kick millions of people off healthcare. They don't care. They're going to repeal the ACA. That's their next step. So what they're going to do in January, as they've been doing this messaging, even though the messaging so far hasn't stuck, and this is why it's a good thing that there's cracks in Trump's armor right now over this Epstein thing, because his message isn't sticking right now. If it starts sticking that, oh, well, we're blaming the ACA all on the Democrats, and people start believing that mess, then it becomes justified to get back to where we were before the ACA instead of fixing it. So this is all a ploy. This is all a plan.
So, but if subsidies are discontinued, the probability that the Dems take back the House in the midterm goes from the mid-80s into the mid-90s. It becomes very likely that the Democrats, which it was likely before, but it becomes even more likely that the Republicans lose the House in 2020.
And truthfully, yeah, that'll probably happen, but I don't think that's going to change much of anything, because we're just going to have a lot more infighting, where Trump is now doing executive orders with no pushbacks, no calls to the table. But now he's just going to do executive orders being called to the table, and we're going to have basically government at a standstill, because Trump's not going to sign anything that the Democrats do. And they'll take even if they take the House, and even if they take both the House and the Senate, Trump's still not going to sign anything.
Well, there's a theory that Trump is decaying, and it's a hard theory to prove because Trump has always been pretty incoherent. But if that theory has any credence and the Dems take over the House and they impeach him, and people are pissed about the Epstein files, and inflation increases, unemployment increases, and Trump is losing his shit, the increased pressure on Trump will make him behave even more, you know, angrily, more dictatorially, will reduce his credibility even further. Things will get crazier, which will be both a good thing and a bad thing.
But remember, he's insulated. That's the tough part. He's insulated from all the bad stuff. And so who around Trump really tells Trump that right now prices are too high? Trump goes out and tells everybody else that it's all the Democrats' fault. He's inherited this. Just give me time. So that's the tough part of where we're going to be.
What happens if people start disrespecting him to his face at rallies and in the press corps?
Remember that happened. That actually happened in his first term. People did not like Trump. We have such a that short-term memory around politics, and that's why when people forget Trump hid in the we had more societal unrest under his first term than we did under any president. We had people protesting out front because remember they used tear gas and everything else.
He put up a wall around the White House.
Yep.
He hid in his bunker. So yeah, that could happen.
When that happened, did things get any better?
Well,
No.
Speaking of walls, hold on a second. Speaking of walls, because I wanted to bring up a person that may be a candidate. I don't know enough about him and everything, but Rick, you spent some time in Colorado and everything, and apparently they are facing dire warnings as high winds are risking fire, and they're upset at their Excel, which I guess is one of their power companies, and everything like that, because their governor is asking for transparency, as over 57,000 customers as of a few days ago were still in the dark. But he's also accusing Trump of kind of what we're saying, playing political games after FEMA denied disaster requests. So what's our take on, one, Paulus as a candidate and this notion of Trump playing political games? Because that's what the Colorado governor is saying he's doing.
Trump will withhold disaster funds from states he doesn't like. And he's pissed at Colorado. And Colorado, what happens in Colorado? We've been following it because that's where I'm from. Right. The mountains squeeze all the moisture out of the air. So on the east of the mountains, the humidity is very low. So even though the temperatures can be below zero, you've got extreme fire danger. And there have already been some fires. So yeah, that's exactly what's happening. And the guy you mentioned, I don't know him, but that's an advantage in today's politics to have not a long record to be attacked on.
Well, speaking of records to be attacked on, NPR, and they've been attacked by Trump as well, are showing that there are skyrocketing numbers of no-shows in immigration court. So I'm guessing a lot of people are, and I've even seen notices in some of the apartment complexes that I'm familiar with, which are telling people what to do if ICE should come knocking on the doors and everything like that. So I guess some people are just like saying that they're not going to deal with it by being no-shows in immigration court. So what is y'all's take on this?
Your safety is no longer guaranteed. But right. ICE hangs out outside a court and they scoop you up even though you've done everything right by the book, and they will still grab you. And there was a guy who's been here 30 years who was some Bulgarian guy married to an American, swept up by ICE, taken to detention, had diabetes, wasn't treated while he was in custody, if you believe his lawyers, and he died in custody. A guy who's been here 30 years. Married to an American, was applying for his, has been applying for years to become a citizen, or at least get permanent. So I got a question for Sasha. Mm-hmm. So yesterday was the shortest day of the year. So over in Ukraine, where the worst days of winter are setting in, does that mean that the border with the U.S. working with Russia to fuck over Ukraine what's happening? Is it a stalemate for the next 2 months until the weather gets better?
No, the fights still continue even after the bad weather already in. Putin needs more territory for his talks to American or for any other reasons. But you know what? All those talks now, it's a real waste of time. Why? Because European Union has frozen this $250 billion of Russian funds. It's frozen now, and it's used now to collateralize the loan of $90 billion to Ukraine. So Ukraine today, it has weapons, it has money, it has everything. They don't need US, period. They just don't need them. I don't know why they continue to come to Florida and to listen to all this Vitkov and what's other name, Kushner and all that uh, all these clowns. I really don't understand. They're doing from political correctness point of view. Well, America, they used to help to Ukraine at one point. Now they don't help anymore, but they still have a lot of influence. Okay, so we'll come, we'll talk. Russian position during the last year since Trump is in power hasn't changed even a yacht, even like 1 millimeter for nothing. They haven't ever changed their position. So all this talks now, but at least earlier U.S. Pressured Ukraine here and for, but still Ukraine hold on. Let's say that as a territory, they're not prepared to give away territories. So that's where it is, and I don't know all the talks right now beside being wasted time. I don't know really what's the need for anybody. Why they're still continuing.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good question. Good question. And folks are still wondering what's going on with that and all along those lines.
Well, I
And
have
that's what,
I have one small point about Colorado. If you
yeah, go
watched
for it.
that Broncos game yesterday, in the last minute of the game, a receiver for the Broncos uh, took a vicious hit and was taken out of the game on a neck board. So he's not paralyzed. He just got a concussion. So that's good news. If you wondered what happened to that guy.
Okay, that is good news and everything like that. How concerned do you think we should be about the state mental hospitals not really doing a really good job of working on people's mental health, but instead many people are saying that they've turned it into prisons. There was actually another article in NPR or a report from NPR that was talking about how a lot of people are fearing that those that are being committed to mental health institutions are actually being committed to a prison because they're not getting care. Matter of fact, the Marshall Project, Cleveland, and KFF Health News interviewed some of the folks that were involved in one of those facilities in Ohio, and they're wondering whether they are really able to do what they were supposed to do because they're saying that state psychiatric hospitals nationwide have largely lost the ability to treat patients before their mental health deteriorates and they are charged with crimes, and therefore that's sounding like a lot of these places are becoming more like prisons versus
That's been a
uh,
problem for the entire history of the United States. That unless you can afford to pay for, really good private care, you're likely to get really crappy public care.
right,
And plus, in the last 40 years, 50 years, sympathy for, like, it used to be a standard plot point on legal shows on TV in the 60s, the 70s, the 50s. Not guilty by reason of insanity.
right,
Never, even like with Nick Reiner, the kid who murdered Rob Reiner and his mom. That guy was obviously insane. They changed his meds. He was seen to be insane, and that will be part of the defense. But nobody is expressing sympathy for him as the crazy guy. So sympathy for people with mental illness. Obviously, it's hard to be sympathetic to him. He slashed his parents' throats, but sympathy in general for crazy people in America. Uh, we're a less sympathetic country than we were 50 years ago, and that extends to mental health care.
Well, I've got friends that drive, and I don't know. I think Toby probably has some friends that drive for it as well. That drive for Uber and Lyft. It's a very popular chains around here that help people get around if you don't want to do mass transit in the bus and do things like that. But now they are getting some flack from the New York Times because of their background checks. So I was just wondering how essential do you think background checks are, and do you think that they actually are working even in this kind of situation? Because they're saying that they're essential for keeping the passengers safe, promising Uber does that all its drivers have passed a screening for violent crimes, but now they're finding that while they might have gotten away with while the violent crimes have been rejected, there are other crimes that have been murder, sexual assault, kidnapping, and terrorism that they have rejected those drivers for those reasons. But in 22 states, the company did approve people convicted of most other crimes, including child abuse, assault, and stalking, so long as the convictions are at least 7 years old. So, how safe do you feel you are if you're getting in some of these cars?
But you have to exercise like extreme caution. You may not want to have the Uber driver let you out right at your address. And so there are two things with background checks. One is, are they done properly?
Hmm.
And do they have access to all relevant information? Two is that information, if done properly, adequately predictive? And there are failures in both parts. So yeah, you cannot be 100% confident that your driver isn't a lunatic. And
Yep.
before using those services, you should probably Google the stats on what your risk actually is statistically.
Yep, that makes sense. Everything, Steve. I see you've joined us. Glad you've joined us. I brought up earlier, and just briefly, nobody really wanted to jump on him, but I know you're a political uh, fan of a lot of people and everything. So I don't know if you had any thoughts on the late great Jim Hunt. He did seem like he brought the
Oh
progressive.
yeah, I was going to open up with that, but I got a little late. I'll try to do that tomorrow. But yeah, just for those of you, North Carolina lost one of the most significant leaders in the state's history, the late former Governor Jim Hunt. Jim Hunt was governor from, well, first of all, his story. He grew up in Wilson in eastern North Carolina. He was a really, really charismatic man, a lawyer. He ended up going into the Peace Corps, was in Nepal for many years, and then when he came back, he worked for Terry Stanford, who was a very advocate for the Research Triangle Park in North Carolina. And then he ran for lieutenant governor in 1972 and won a surprise victory as the youngest lieutenant governor in North Carolina history. And then ran for governor. I think it was in 1977. He ran for the first term as governor. Might have been 74. I can't remember. But he served two terms as governor. And in 1984, he ran against Jesse Helms and lost a very close race. And people thought it was over for him, but he went back to his firm, worked for a while, and then became governor again in 1992, serving for another 8 years. They changed the Constitution. So he served as governor of North Carolina for 16 years. I'll tell you, if you come into North Carolina today and you look at Research Triangle Park, it was amazing. He built most of RTP, most of the big companies came in. He spearheaded the I-40 to the Wilmington, and often joked that when he told Secretary Tom Bradshaw, who eventually became mayor of Raleigh, he said, "I didn't see Tom Bradshaw in 4 years. I sent him to Washington to bring back the federal money," and he did. When I won my historic election to be the first Indian American, he called me and he said, "Steve, I just want to congratulate you." And I said, "Governor, I just became a councilman." He goes, "It doesn't matter. You won an election as the first Indian American. It's historic." And when I introduced him a few years later at an event, he said in that Southern accent, "I'd like to thank Councilman Rao for that introduction. If my wife Carolyn were here, she would find it interesting. But if my mother were alive, she would have believed it." So he had that kind of charisma about him. And I know, Mark, your mother probably knew him as well. But
Yes.
he never lost to North Carolina. I think he was very well known around the country, close to Bill Clinton and others. And I think represented a time in politics where he had Republican friends and moderates, but he worked together to lead the state. And his daughter is now the lieutenant governor. So kind of like the Skywalker legacy in Star Wars. The question now is, will the Hunt legacy live on? And also his grandson, Hunter, is a rising star as well. I think he's following in his grandfather's footsteps in the diplomatic corps, I think, as an ambassador. But there's been talk about him being the next Governor Hunt. And he was an NC State graduate, but
yeah, it could be. And I know you want to get to some other stories as well, but yeah, he was governor from 1977 to 1985 and from 93 to 2001. So
okay,
the first term
okay, I was right. Okay,
77.
yeah, and he ran for Senate, lost. I think his funeral's on Friday, so I'll be going to it. And just an amazing man. And what he was responsible for Kay Hagan running. He was very upset about the division. I can't even imagine if he ever thought politics would be where it is today, and whether his own state of North Carolina, which was a Democratic state, being so taken over by the Republicans and gerrymandering and things like that.
Yeah. Well, he was a fan of some controversial things too, because he was definitely a fan of the Equal Rights Amendment, and he urged its approval from the state legislature, which failed to ratify it by 2 votes and everything. And he definitely was also known for creating the Smart Start program for pre-kindergartners. So he was definitely known as an education governor. There's no doubt about that. So
Smart Start, I forgot about it,
Yeah, because Hunt said that under testing and accountability measures he put into place, test scores went up. So apparently, while he was governor, the test scores went up, and he got some praise for that and everything. So he was definitely known as a education type leader and everything like that, and even created some establishments like you're talking about, the North Carolina Biotechnology Center, the Centennial Campus on North Carolina State University, and the North Carolina School of Science and Math. So he actually created that, and all along those lines. It was involved in some political things, including the trial of the Wilmington 10 and everything like that. So definitely was a well-known and in many ways, as you said, well-respected person. But what are some of the other stories that you wanted to get to?
Well, I think interesting about the blockade in Venezuela. I actually disagree with Fareed Zakaria. He did a good take yesterday on Global Public Square that we're focusing much more like the Monroe Doctrine, dominating, looking at our own region, and how he talked about how, from a trade perspective, trade with Latin America is only 480 million. But if you look at Europe or you look at Asia, it's about 3 trillion. So it doesn't really make interest to not focus in the other areas of the world. But I will say, I didn't hear Zakaria talk about the fact that you do have these terrible dictators in these countries, which many Venezuelans are fleeing here illegally because they're literally being tortured and murdered. So I think something has to be done, and I commend Trump on taking them on. I actually agree with the president. I can't believe I would say that. But anyway, go ahead.
I disagree, because it's not up to our country to decide who runs other countries. And that's where we get into that sticky situation of policing the world. It's not up to us to say that. I mean, yeah, we all agree Maduro is a bad person, but is it up to the U.S. to send military in, take out Maduro, and put in somebody that we agree with? Is that I think that is the problem that we're running into. If we're going into regime change, now we're doing nation building, now we're doing blood for oil. So that is the problem that I don't think that we should be championing, because we can all agree somebody's bad. We can always agree that Kim Jong-un is a horrible individual, but should we bomb North Korea and put in somebody that we like?
So I object to the term. Wait. I object to the term doctrine with regard to Trump. Now, Monroe Doctrine made sense. I'm sure that they had thoughtful, maybe heated arguments in the Monroe White House about developing this policy. And I know they had heated, arguments within the Bush II White House about whether to invade Iraq, with experienced diplomats like Rumsfeld, Cheney. And even so, that was a disaster. But in the Trump White House, you don't have anybody with any experience. And you can imagine that the discussion in the Trump White House does not, rise to the level of doctrine, because those guys are doofuses.
Well, apparently, speaking of doofuses, you mentioned Vance earlier on this show and everything like that, and apparently he pushed back on one of the MAGA folks because he pushed back on Nick Fontes, who apparently had some words that weren't too kind to his wife, who is of Indian descent and everything like that. So apparently he pushed back on some of that, even though there's been some speculation about how long he's going to stick with his wife and everything like that. So what is your take on this? Because apparently he was not too pleased, and he basically told Nick Fontes to eat so that bodily part that comes out of our backside of our body.
So all I know is that Candace, what's her name, is the craziest of them all right now, because she is just saying a ton of super duper anti-Semitic craziness, conspiracy stuff, and that is it's like her sonic boom is tearing apart the rest of the pundit class.
Hey, Steve, I know you had any thoughts on that as well, but also, what is your take on when we talk about nation building? If people are doing scams, because they are saying that in Somali, the people in Minnesota have got a scam that has raised as much money as the entire GDP of that country, and actually more so, because they're saying a staggering $9 billion may have been stolen by these scammers that are tied to Somalia and everything like that. So, what is your take, and should we go after these kind of folks that are plainly doing these kind of scams? And we've seen the scammers like this even from some of the Eastern European countries.
I mean, I think, I don't know. I mean, I think that, you always wonder if the scams just from a rotten few that, then you end up generalizing. I know that we have a very, very solid Nigerian community here, but for many years, people said, oh, Nigerians are all about scams. So I don't know. I mean, I just think we have to be aware of scams across all boards and make those who perform them, accountable, right? I mean, but don't know if it's a wise foreign policy. Meanwhile, we didn't have a chance to get into Ukraine and the war.
Right.
Maybe
we talked about it before you got here.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I'll go back and hook up on them tomorrow. But I want to wish everyone a happy holidays. There's also, Mark, I don't know what you're hearing much about the Leo Williams scandal, or is it just
he's in hot water because there's a lot of people that are thinking that he might have been grooming folks even when he was in school and teaching and all along those lines. So yeah, it is definitely a serious scandal that's in the social media, but there are people in social media that are fanning the flames, and whether and how much they're fanning the flames, who knows how successful they will be. But yeah, they're definitely an issue of concern.
But I mean, there's nothing that can be proven, right? So
it's all nothing that can be proven. Or there are people that say that they had heard rumors about it even prior to him going into office, but I haven't heard anybody that's given concrete evidence. I don't know what Jacoby's heard from his people in the school system and all along those lines, but right now it's all hearsay.
Well, remember what happened to Representative Dwayne Hall? He kissed a girl on the cheek, and then 100 women asked him to resign, and he did. So, I don't know. I mean, it's just not good, But anyway, guys, I want to wish you a happy holidays. I'll be hopefully actually I may be out of town, but just thank you for everything. Looking forward to either the retirement from my political career or another step in my political career. But things are trending in the right direction, but you never know. So we'll know on March 3rd. Voting starts on February 12th. So I'm not taking any days off. Only one day of Christmas I'm taking off, and I'm working the rest of the days. So no holidays for me until March.
Well, I'm here with Black Santa, so I'll be working up until Christmas Eve as well. So I understand that. So I'll be here tomorrow and Wednesday doing these reports and all along those lines. But right now we're going to get out of here. I understand Economics Monday and Media Monday will be reruns, as is the Timeshare Solutions and Surrender. But hope to see you gentlemen on tomorrow. There are some other shows that are coming here that will be live as well. So hope to see you folks later. But right now it's time to get on out of here.
Bye-bye.